What's different about bookkeeping for a nonprofit versus a for-profit business?
Okay, so from our perspective as bookkeepers, the biggest difference is that we're working with boards. We're not working with a business owner who has financial and emotional investment in that particular business and has a goal and objective that they're working to obtain. With boards, obviously every nonprofit is different with how that board is structured. Board members come and go, and as they come and go, their objectives and goals for that organization change. And as a result, sometimes our work has to change to accommodate those changing perspectives, ideas, and goals for the nonprofit organization.
Welcome to the NonProfit Nook, the podcast for nonprofit leaders, board members, and community changemakers who want to build stronger, smarter organizations. I'm your host, Wendy Kidd, a longtime business owner and nonprofit leader, and I'm here to bring you real talk, real tools, and real stories to help you thrive in the nonprofit world. I'll be talking with local nonprofit leaders, community changemakers, and experts in everything from board development to fundraising and digital tools, sharing real stories and simple strategies you can actually use. Because running a nonprofit is hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Let's get started. Today's guest is Kelsey Gleason, co-owner of Educated Bookkeeping. A former high school math teacher turned into an entrepreneur, Kelsey brings her love of numbers and passion for helping people in the world of small business and nonprofit finance. Since launching Educated Bookkeeping in 2021 with her business partner, she's built a thriving client list, including nonprofits like Hugs Cafe. Kelsey doesn't just manage the books. She teaches business owners and nonprofit boards how to truly understand their financial reports and use them to make smarter decisions all year long, or at least we hope.
We hope.
Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate you having me on today.
Of course. I'm so excited to talk about what is most people think as a boring subject and a nerd subject, but as I just told a previous podcast guest, nerd is welcome here. So
perfect. Then I'm ready and excited.
Yay! Okay, cool. So let's start off with something that I think most people don't even understand, but they know is a thing. What's different about bookkeeping for a nonprofit versus a for-profit business?
Okay, so from our perspective as bookkeepers, the biggest difference is that we're working with boards. We're not working with a business owner who has financial and emotional investment in that particular business and has a goal and objective that they're working to obtain. With boards, obviously every nonprofit is different with how that board is structured. Board members come and go, and as they come and go, their objectives and goals for that organization change. And as a result, sometimes our work has to change to accommodate those changing perspectives, ideas, and goals for the nonprofit organization.
I can only imagine, because as an event planner, I have been through that with working with just the bride or working with the bride and the groom and the mom and the other dad and the stepdad. And it becomes a board in and of itself.
You're managing a lot of different personalities. They all kind of bring their own agendas and ideas to the table. And that can be great for collaboration. But if the group as a whole isn't quite able to assimilate that into a single vision, it can make juggling those many personality dynamics a little bit more challenging than it can be when you're just working with a single owner of a business.
Well, and I'm sure you're also dealing with a lot of board members and or staff members that don't even realize what a financial report is or how to read it. So they certainly don't know what their goal is for reading that report and what it should look like. So right. Thus the name, I'm sure, Educated Bookkeeping.
Yeah. Yes. A lot of it, what we do is, especially at the onset of a partnership with either a business or an organization, is first of all, sitting down, trying to understand what their objectives and goals are, and trying to make sure that those reports reflect in a nice, easy, user-friendly way what those goals are. And we typically like to sit down with them at least a few times during the first couple rounds of months and make sure that what we're presenting them with from a financial report standpoint aligns with the information they need. Oftentimes, most of these softwares come with generic charts of accounts that are set up just to hit the high points, but aren't necessarily designed specifically for what that organization or business needs. And so making sure you take the time to customize those, items to really reflect the needs of the organization or business is super important to make those reports far more useful.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But first, I want to ask for those little tiny nonprofits who have not hired a bookkeeper, they don't have anybody in-house to do it, or they don't have an outsourced. What can we do? What can we talk about to help them? What are your recommendations for those people who are basically dealing with the bookkeeping themselves?
Right. So always one of those things, I think it can be super challenging. Oftentimes it's a volunteer stepping into that role who may or may not have any kind of background or education in business finance or nonprofit accounting, and they just want to be helpful and do the best job that they can, but we're not sure necessarily where to go. I would encourage any board that is putting this onto a volunteer to get them some training. If this is something they really want to do as a way to help the organization, give them the tools they need to be successful at it. Guessing and checking or looking up on YouTube is fine to a certain extent, but it's extremely time-consuming, and any volunteer needs to be using their time in an efficient manner to help support that organization. So first, start with training. When it comes to softwares, there's tons out there. I mean, there's tons of free ones like Wave, and there's like FreshBooks and HoneyBooks and popular ones like QuickBooks. But regardless of what you're working with, if you haven't checked out something like TechSoup, where tons of softwares are available at reduced cost to nonprofits, I really encourage you to go there. QuickBooks is the one accounting software that they offer up there, and the QuickBooks Plus subscription, which is typically $80 to $100 a month through QuickBooks, you can get for $80 for the entire year. So it's a pretty steep discount for a software that is going to be with the organization for the long term. It also offers plenty of other things like donor management systems at significantly reduced costs. But if you haven't checked out TechSoup, do that. You may find that it has far more than you can imagine. And, as a nonprofit, spending that donor money is super important. You want to be fiscally responsible about it, make good choices, and use all the resources available to you so that you can find.
Yeah, for sure. And we want to, just for those who don't know what TechSoup is, it is a wonderful, wonderful website for nonprofits that gives them discounts or free software. So definitely go there. Definitely check out QuickBooks. One of the things that you and I talked about before also was hiring someone to set the software up correctly. And I think that goes hand in hand with the training you mentioned.
Absolutely.
Because you can absolutely hire a CPA or a bookkeeper to just do that. You don't have to have that monthly bill, but
Correct.
You can at least have that first setup fee of getting that chart of accounts like you want it, getting the software set up, and then training whoever's going to be inputting things to be able to use that and to be able to pull the reports that they need to pull. And you also mentioned quality control. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So, we're all human. No matter what job we're doing, none of us are ever going to be perfect. So you've got a volunteer who is working on the books, who is presenting your financials every single month, who is helping to make sure that that work is accurate. Are you just relying on them to make sure that what they're presenting is 100% the correct picture moving forward? Or are you giving them tools, oversight, a partner that can double check their work, just so everybody feels like what we're getting out of this is actually true? The financial health and well-being of an organization is a lot of weight to put on one person, especially a volunteer who may not be 100% comfortable with that role. And the more support you can give them to help them be successful, whether it is through setting up training or having somebody review their work, it's not meant to be like hey, I got you,
Right.
This is what you did
It's
wrong.
not an ambush thing.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's meant to be just a checks and balance, just to make sure that what's happening is actually true in that report. Give them the tools they need to be as successful as possible.
Absolutely. Because, your board is looking at your reports and they're looking at, is the money being used the way it's supposed to be used? They're not necessarily looking at, did we actually spend that much on our gala? They understand that that's what the report tells them, but they're not drilling down into the transaction by transaction. So you've got to have somebody else who's going to help you balance that and make sure it's correct before the board actually sees it. A lot of times I think that's the treasurer on the board is that person who's going to double check things, because typically, you've got your executive director or somebody who's functioning as an executive director, whether it be volunteer or not. They're doing that hard labor, and then the treasurer should be backing them up. And I think it's really important for the treasurer and that person to have a good relationship, a good feedback circle, which we have a podcast on that. Check out how to do feedback. But, have that trusting relationship between the two of them so that they're working as a team, not just as somebody trying to catch the other one.
Right.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Perfect. So how, when we start growing, we get bigger and, bookkeeping takes up more and more of our time. How do we know when they should go ahead and hire a professional bookkeeper?
So the biggest indicator is you're not getting financial reports in a timely manner to maximize your board meetings.
Yeah.
If you're 2, 3, 4 months out on reports because a volunteer that is working on them just doesn't have the available free time to keep up with them on a regular basis, that's kind of the waving the white flag and saying, hey, maybe this is something we need to look at outsourcing so that we can get good information timely so that we can make good decisions for the organization. That's probably the biggest red flag.
Absolutely. And I think that can come also from people who are maybe not trained well and causing a problem with the financial reports, because I've definitely been on boards where the financial reports could not be certified because they didn't make sense. There were problems with them. And if you're constantly having to go back and do that, you're wasting your board members' time as well.
Right.
As the staff that's dealing with it. So, it may be time to find a new person. It may be time to reach out to your donors and say, hey, for us to use your money effectively, we've got to pay for a bookkeeper to make sure we're doing this correctly.
Right.
I think most people would understand that.
Absolutely.
Transparency is a great thing when it comes to asking for money.
Transparency, communication, absolutely.
Absolutely. So when it's time to find that bookkeeper, I know you have opinions on this and I can't wait to hear them. What are some questions to ask? What are things to look for in finding that bookkeeper?
So one of the things when we get an inquiry, if the first question is always this, how much will it cost? I typically know that they haven't really had to look for a bookkeeper or worked with bookkeepers very often.
Yeah.
Price, I know obviously we care about where our donors' monies go and we want to make sure we're spending it responsibly. But as they often say, good isn't cheap and often cheap isn't good. So
and fast is in there, I think, too.
Yeah,
I think there's
something
three things in that saying, yes. Cheap is not fast, or if it's fast, it's not good. Something like that.
Yeah. So, obviously price is important, but there are really 5 other things I encourage people to consider and ask when they're interviewing for bookkeeping help. First, how often will the individual be working in the books? A bookkeeper may work weekly, may work monthly, may work quarterly. You need to know how often they're working in there so that you know when to expect things, when you can expect timely reports. Ideally, when somebody is working in your books weekly, sometimes even daily, they see on a regular basis what's going on in the organization or the business, and as a result can ask more timely, pertinent questions and be proactive about the financial reporting and making sure that it's accurate. If they work on it once a month, fine. Quarterly, fine. But just make sure you're getting that information up front. The other information you want to ask is, who is going to be working in my books? You may hire a firm, but there's everything from one-person bookkeeping firms to large firms with 25 staff, some nationally, some internationally, some outsource and subcontract to international firms.
Yeah.
All of those are viable operations for bookkeeping firms, but it's important that you know who you're going to be working with, who's going to be in there, who will you be communicating with on a regular basis, and if it is a larger firm, how often should you expect turnover in that seat? If you're working with an individual bookkeeper, just a individual sole proprietor operator, one of the big questions for them and even for something like a CPA firm is quality control. So we talked about that earlier for the volunteer. That should apply also to any outsourced firm that you use. Who is quality controlling the work of the bookkeeper, especially if it's an organization where you're going to experience a couple of turnovers in bookkeepers over the course of the year? Who's making sure that the work is consistent, is accurate, and in the long term will be good for reporting at the end of the fiscal year?
Sure.
So quality control and making sure that they have some kind of process in place to ensure the work is of good quality.
And this is even for people who are just one bookkeeper in their business. They should have somebody who's double checking their work.
Yes.
Because we all know, as all small business owners have to do, we collaborate with other small business owners. So they should be collaborating with somebody to check their work.
Absolutely. And again, it's not supposed to be a gotcha thing or to be a critical thing. It's just solely meant to make sure that what's being presented, your support, and what's being presented is the best product possible.
If it's your week to work on that client and you're sick, who's going to do it?
Right.
So we need to have backup systems.
Right.
Yeah.
So after quality control, the next thing to ask about is deliverables. So, a lot of people think about end of year as being the primary objective for when we want to make sure reports are done, they're accurate, and we're good. But if you're an active board that is meeting monthly and you can't get reports for the previous month by the time you have that meeting, that's a concern. Then you're always working on data that is 6, 7, 8 weeks delayed. So you want to be able to ask them, so when are you going to officially close each month? Do you have a guaranteed closing date? Do you have a guaranteed date that I will get financial reports? Now, in our firm, our financial delivery date is the 15th. Now, we do have some boards that meet on like the second Tuesday of every month. Well, sometimes that's day 8 of a month. And as a result, we will reshift our process to accommodate that so that board has the most updated financials for that meeting. It's something you need to really communicate and ask of whatever bookkeeping firm you're talking to make sure that you've got those firm deadlines presented. You want to make sure you're going into it with eyes wide open so that you get through the first month and you're like, okay, I'm ready. Can't wait to see these great financials. And they're like, oh, it'll be another 2-3 weeks.
Well, and that would be a red flag for them to look for in a bookkeeper is if the bookkeeper doesn't ask them up front, when do you need these reports?
Yes.
So, yeah.
And then lastly, just security. So do they have a secure portal that will allow us to share sensitive information? If they're accepting sensitive documents over email, that would kind of be a little bit of a red flag because I mean, group email is just not secure.
Safe. Yeah.
So
we should all know this. Our emails get hacked
all the time.
And unfortunately, there's so much private information in our emails.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So if they are that flippant about receiving sensitive documents before you've even hired them, how are they going to treat that sensitive information long term? So you want to ask about what kind of security systems they have in place to receive that sensitive documentation and the care that they're treating that with. Just, again, another protective measure for your organization. So those are really the 5 things outside of price you should consider when looking for a new bookkeeper.
I have to say, even though I've had many a bookkeeper because I've been in business for over 20 years, I didn't know these things until you told me. And I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those things where finances can sometimes intimidate and scare a lot of people. And
absolutely.
And so they don't want to they don't know what to ask or they don't know what to expect because there are no real set standards for bookkeepers or bookkeeping firms. So, you're really kind of going in blind, and unless you have a lot of prior experience where you can pull on that bad experience and that bad experience and that bad experience and say, okay, I'm going to ask all of these questions of my next hire so I know I don't have that bad experience again, it's almost like you're just learning from experience instead of just learning right up front.
And if you haven't had a good experience, you still don't know the right questions.
That's true.
Just saying. But you bring up a really good point, and that actually gives me a good segue because people do find this intimidating. People don't like talking about the financial numbers. And it's so funny because in a nonprofit world, the number one responsibility of a board member is making sure that the nonprofit is fiscally responsible. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how many times board members have told me, I don't know what this report means. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what I'm looking at. I have no idea what I'm looking for. Right. What should I be doing? And so how do you approach teaching your clients, especially the nonprofit boards, about financial reports in a way that makes the numbers less intimidating and helps them understand what they should be doing?
Sure. A lot of it has to do with first coming to them, talking about what their objectives and goals are, what information do they want out of the report. Then through our setup process or cleanup process, restructuring that chart of accounts so it reflects those goals, wording everything in user-friendly language that is clearly identifying whether we're working at the gala, are these gala's expenses, are these an outreach initiative expenses, and making sure that that's spelled out in all of the reports so they can clearly see, oh, hey, these donations came out for this back-to-school outreach event. These are the expenses we spent on that. Do those align? Oh, I can see very clearly in the reports that we still have $500 left of that specific donation, that restricted donation. How are we going to utilize that moving forward?
Yeah.
I think the more clearly you structure the reports, the more user-friendly it makes them, so that when you have that first, second, or third sit-down with the board and you go through what the structure is now for the reports, and you can talk through, hey, this is this is that, and drill down into saying, okay, you've noticed this shift in this particular category. This is why we saw this increase in gross wages significantly this month. We were running payroll weekly, and this month was a 5-week payroll run. And then, or we had a significant amount of overtime on staff, and that's why you see the jump there.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're talking to the board through the numbers about anomalies or oddities that may jump out of them. We like to specifically break down items like the statement of activity into monthly sections so that they can see how the organization's health has been monthly.
Yeah.
And then that also helps to drill down about when an organization has a specific event, whether it is something like a gala or an outreach or mission driven, they can see how those expenses affected the overall bottom line of the nonprofit through the course of the year.
Absolutely. I 100%. I think it's very important to orient new board members so that they understand what they're doing. And something else to throw into that is you want to make sure you go back to your bookkeeper when something comes up, such as we have this new grant and they are going to expect X on the report. Mm-hmm. Can you help us figure out how to report that?
Yes.
So, I think this is a constant conversation. I don't think this is a set it and forget it situation. So people need to remember having a good relationship with your bookkeeper is very important.
Absolutely.
And that comes back to communication. And whoever is in touch with the bookkeeper needs to know these are things that are important to tell them. Mm-hmm. So you can't assume that, your ED knows that they need to go back to the bookkeeper and tell them, hey, we have a new grant and here's what the report is. And you can't assume that the board member knew to do that either or the treasurer knew to do that either. So lots of communication there. I know that you also gave me some really fancy tips and tricks for QuickBooks. So I really want you to share those. What are the things that you like to have them set up in QuickBooks that make it easier to get the reports that they need?
So there's plenty of times where I'll take a look at a set of books for, a business or a nonprofit, and you've got a chart of accounts that is 100, 150 categories long. It's incredibly overwhelming. It makes the reports 2-3 pages long. It just is not it's not a user-friendly experience. And a lot of times they do that because they are really breaking down at a micro level the expenses associated with this event or that event or this volunteer appreciation or this gala moment or this outreach or this mission. And so something that is, supplies, which is really just a single item, gets broken down into 5 or 6 other categories, and it's now really expanding that report. Instead of doing that, with QuickBooks, you can actually use classes.
Yes.
As long as you have the QuickBooks Plus subscription, which you can get discounted through TechSoup, you can use classes and instead assign classes to every donation, to every expense, and then run your statement of activity by classes. And then it'll pull those events, outreach, mission, galas, things out and say, okay, this was all of the income assigned to the gala. These were all of the expenses assigned to the gala, and here's a report that breaks that down.
Yes.
It helps keep the overall report nice, clean, and simple, but still allows you the detail that you may want in order to analyze the success and the viability of some of the programs that the organization is initiating.
Yeah, absolutely. So people think about it. Think about your gala, because we all have one. We all have that moneymaker thing. You want to track that. You want to be able to see what you can improve money-wise. You've got to be able to use classes to do that. If you are initiating a new program, a new service that you're putting out, you need to track what did it cost you to do that. So make sure you have these little classes. They're just a little thing, but they make it so much easier. So you don't have to go line item by line item to figure out, is this working or not?
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing is projects. Another feature of the QuickBooks Plus subscription is the capability to track projects. When you have a restricted grant that has specific requirements that have to be reported on a regular basis on how that money was spent, if you make that grant a project in QuickBooks, you can run a statement of activity solely for that grant.
There you go.
Just right off the bat. It's super quick. You don't have to go through and dig through all of the transactions from the past year and try and figure it out, or like some of those chart of accounts, track it in something that's 3 pages long. You can just track it as a project, assign a project to every expense that it's associated with. Same thing with the donation, and go from there.
Okay, all the grant writers are going to have a big sigh of relief if you do this. So whoever is writing your grants, you need to tell them that this is something you can do. And then whoever is talking to the bookkeeper, go tell them that this is something we need to do so that we can make these grants wonderful.
Right.
All these applications and all these reports that we got to turn in as nonprofits, this is crucial for saving time, people. So
crucial for saving time, crucial for making sure you're staying compliant, and give that grant paperwork to your bookkeeper so they can review it, make sure they know exactly what's allowed to be counted towards this grant. They can help you stay compliant and make sure that those transactions go against that grant report.
Absolutely. I love this. These are things that I think don't get talked about enough. And it's just day-to-day operations that makes it so much easier for everyone.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those things. As someone, if you're a smaller organization that, again, doesn't necessitate outsourcing, make sure that you're giving the person who's doing the work the support they need to utilize these tools. If you're paying for the software, use the tools that it possesses to help make your life, the board's life, the volunteer's life so much easier.
Again, invest in training for people.
Yeah.
Don't just send them to YouTube. Don't just send them to Google. Come on, people, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. Make sure that you are giving them the support they need by getting them training.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. So I'm going to ask you one last question because I think this is one that everybody wants to hear. For people who aren't numbers people, the nonprofit leaders that just don't, their numbers are not their gig, because I can't tell you how many of them they tell me that. What's one report or metric you think that they should absolutely understand and monitor?
So overhead expenses.
Yes.
Are almost always a relatively fixed expense for most operations. You want to know what that bottom line number is to keep the doors open on a monthly basis.
Yes.
Otherwise, how can you accurately project how valuable those donations are?
Yeah.
You should know what your rent costs, what your insurance costs, what your bookkeeper costs. You should have all of those itemized and clear so that you know, okay, if we don't bring in at least $10,000 in donations this month, we're operating in the red at the very least.
Yes.
So I think that's a clear starting metric. That's a great place for any organization or any business to start with.
It's so crucial for so many things because, number one, it's the thing that they least are likely to fundraise for because so many grants don't want to pay for overhead expenses, which don't even get me started. That's a whole nother podcast. But I think that it's also the easiest trackable and the easiest red flag that you will see in your P&L reports because it's going to be the first thing that gets changed that they don't think you're going to see. Right? So if you don't have an explanation for whoever made that change, this is your easy way to catch, hey, why did our rent go up by $200? Why did our payroll double last month?
Right.
Did we bring in some contractors and we weren't aware of it? Did we go over? Like, what happened? Did I start a new project and it required way more time than we ever thought it did? Do we need to streamline something? Is there a digital tool that could make that easier and faster for us so we can pay $50 a month for that tool versus $300 in labor?
Right.
Like operating expenses are huge and they just get overlooked so easily.
They do. I had a case one time where we found that the organization had been paying for a storage unit.
Yes.
From many years back, but the board had changed so much, nobody had considered it. So when we went through and drilled through overhead expenses and we saw it, we're like, what is this? And I was like, I don't know. It's been the same expense for the last, 5 years.
They forgot about their storage unit?
They did.
Oh, poor babies.
But it was an expense they were paying for from an overhead perspective that they didn't need.
Yeah.
Now they were able to resolve it, which is great, but making sure you do that health check every once in a while on what those overhead expenses are, especially as you have changes within the board.
If nothing else, do it once a year when you do your budget.
Yes.
It's part of your budgeting process to look at your operating expenses and see if you can change them in any way.
Yes.
So, and not to say that you should absolutely go with the cheapest of whatever the thing is. I'm not a fan of that. I believe in paying for what things are worth.
Right.
But as a nonprofit, we all know that price tends to drive us a lot.
Yes.
But look at those overhead expenses at least once a year, if not more. But keep an eye out open, keep an ear open for things that can help with those operating expenses, and make sure you're communicating to your board members.
Right.
And you're telling them, I'm going to save you money here, or I think we need to spend an extra $20 here, or whatever. Because we all know that you're trying to get your budget approved once a year so you don't have to go back for each little thing. Mm-hmm. But at least do it once a year when you do that budget.
Yes.
So, yeah. All right. Was there anything else that you would like to cover today? I think we hit all the things we talked about.
We did.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, this was fabulous. I hope everyone gets as much out of this as I did. At least learn how to hire a bookkeeper. Because clearly I did not. I knew people were good for certain reasons, but I didn't know all the reasons I should be looking. So thank you so much for being here with us, Kelsey.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the NonProfit Nook. We're building better nonprofits together. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other nonprofit leaders who need support. Follow the NonProfit Nook on social media and sign up for our email list for extra tips and updates. You can also visit thenonprofitnook.com to see the show notes and leave a comment telling me what topics you want next. Your feedback shapes the show. See you next time.